How's it going, everyone? Well, it seems that spring has come early this year. That's a very common thing lately. Actually, on that topic, I was just listening to a TED Talk where they were discussing Walden Pond. It's that old On Walden Pond. Can't remember who wrote that. But anyway, they've been documenting it for the last, say over the last 150 years. Spring has come. It's now coming 3 weeks earlier for this particular spot. And it made me think about how we talk about global warming as if we really know what's going on. You hear a lot of people discussing it, pretending like, we really understand how it works as an individual. Not to say that science isn't grasping a lot of it, but, our misgivings about what global warming means. Some people are saying our planet's heating up and going out of control. Others are saying, no, it's just going to head us into an ice age. But we are changing. Our climate is changing. And it's funny, the research I've done over the years, I've found that I remember years ago I was reading this article about the Atlantic currents and the Gulf Stream current, which is an ocean current that goes up north from the Gulf Stream. And one thing about this current is that basically what happens is that it gets to the point where it goes up north into the colder regions, and then the salt sinks, and that creates the conveyor belt, which continues the cycle, continues the current. What happens is, once the glaciers up near Greenland melt to the point where they've diluted the water so much, the salt can no longer sink. And in that situation, it stops the current altogether. Once it stops the current, it stops the flow, and then the ice sheets are able to come in fast and hard. We tend to think of the world as something that changes over a period of millions of years. But anybody who's looked into the Little Ice Age knows exactly what I'm talking about. These things come quick. 100 years from now, we could be in this crazy, chaotic, freezing cold world. We just don't know. We just don't know what's coming. I think that through ice core samples, I think that is absolutely the most telling of anything that we have. Taking ice core samples, we can go back hundreds of thousands of years and see exactly what the CO2 levels were. So when people argue about saying, well, we've already been at this level before, the Earth goes through cycles, there's nothing different now, well, that's not true. The CO2 levels are much higher than they've ever been in recorded history, but as well as ice core samples they've tested. And we've had lots of little issues that happen because of perhaps volcanic activity or a meteor impact. There are so many little what-ifs, things that can cause the Earth to go through these major upheavals. Perhaps a planetary alignment. We don't know exactly how it works, but the fact is the Earth does shift magnetic poles, and it does it on a regular basis. In fact, the Earth shifts poles about every 200,000 years or so. And the funny thing is, the last time it happened was about 700,000 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, or 650. We're well overdue for a magnetic shift, and for those who have researched it, we're already in the process of one right now, or at least it appears so. And a magnetic shift is different than an actual polar flip where the Earth flips, but it can be, the implications are unknown at this point. So I guess what I'm just kind of getting at is that, the Earth's going through some serious changes. People appear to be going through some serious evolutionary changes, and I'm not talking about the DNA things people talk about, or changes in children, or the indigo kids. I'm not talking about any of that. It's my belief that humans evolve as a species, as a whole, and as we advance, the children are born to accommodate that environment. Or should I say, born to to fit into the environment they live in better. For example, our brains are elastic. Neuroplasticity allows us to adjust to whatever we need, whether we want to be a mathematician or an artist, a musician. And it's my belief that those alterations in our way of being in our brains are recorded and reflected through our DNA and through our cells and are transferred to our children. So as we evolve as a species, what we might call indigo children or, some new type of kid is really just someone who is suitable for the environment that they're born into. Animals do this all the time. Of course, you get caught up in that idea of, is technology a byproduct of, our evolution in our minds? But if you really look at history and you look at where we've come from, you can trace back the Industrial Revolution and see exactly when we were able to isolate and create alloys out of metals so we could build machines big enough to build the things that we need so we could have more and more and more, thereby being able to harness electricity. All these things led to where we are today with our, 100 gigabyte pocket hard drives with all our music on it. And so we move forward with the rest of society, even if we're not, say, born into a technical society, or say where we live doesn't tend to be, if you're born in some Indian mountain area, you may be less prone to have that. But if you believe in that, the morphogenic field, if you will, that Sheldrake talks about, basically means that my knowledge is impacting others around the world, just as theirs is impacting me. Everything I learned is put into the ether, into this, this awareness. Now this becomes mystical and people start saying, oh, that's just, none of that's proven. Of course not. And there's never going to be any proof for the ether. It's going to be something that we have to discover for ourselves. And I do believe in a larger connection, but, we start talking about that, people start, well, let's put it this way. I saw a video the other day at, from the electric universe theory, and they were talking about the nature of consciousness, and the comment section was full of, hateful remarks, angry remarks. How dare you, talk about all this mystical BS. It doesn't fit in with the EU theory, but it really does. Electricity, the electrical nature of the world, everything is out there in these vibrational energies and frequencies that we can pick up on. And those who know this don't find any need to really prove it to anyone, because at this point, materialists are pretty stuck in their ways and they don't want to hear about it. If you can't prove it 50 times over, it doesn't exist. And even then, when you do sometimes, it still doesn't exist. So for those of us who are on that eternal journey to finding the truth in self, you find that you don't need to defend your point of view anymore. You don't need to argue. You see this connection in nature. Perhaps the earth is, responding in kind, not just to our pollution, but not just to our carbon emissions, but heating up because we're heating up, as a species, as a cycle. And all these things are just what ifs, but there's one thing none of us can deny. That's that we're in a period of transition right now as a species. What we're transitioning into remains to be seen. 50 years from now, we could not exist. But I'm pretty sure we will. And that leads people to wonder, how will we exist? In other words, we're never going to go back to not having technology. We'll always know how to create these things. The writings will always exist. The information's out there. And so even if society collapses completely, we will find a way to rebuild it, at least in a way that's maybe more compatible with being a human, if we can figure what that is. So I bid y'all farewell, and hope you have a fantastic day. Whatever your journey you may be on, and wherever your life may take you, embrace it with open arms. Namaste.